Well, I know what happened to the Edmonton Oilers last night, folks. I watched some of the game. I cursed you. I'm sorry, Oilers fans. I haven't watched any hockey since the Leafs were eliminated, and I heard about what an amazing series this was with overtime and double overtime in Edmonton, and so I said I'm going to watch some of this game, and it felt like I was watching the Leafs again. That's kind of what it felt like. It really did. I mean, the Panthers were just so dominant and blew out Edmonton 6-1. And let's hope that Edmonton doesn't lose their confidence, because it's pretty. That was a pretty emphatic win for the Panthers. They're just one hell of a hockey team, folks. The defending Stanley Cup champions for a reason. Now, I'm not saying Edmonton's out of it, because certainly they're not. Edmonton is a better team than the Leafs, but my oh my, what a game! And Brad Marchand, I mean, what can you say about this guy? He is on a mission, absolutely on a mission to win another Stanley Cup. And wow, you'd have to think that Skinner has lost some confidence, but it's just one game, folks, and it'll be a real gut check for the Edmonton Oilers. But a tough blowout loss. That was tough. So I watched the first period in a bit, and I just said this kind of reminds me of watching the Leafs right now, the way that Ford had just dismantled them. So I will not watch the next game. I will not watch Game 4, and hopefully that means Edmonton might win, because obviously I'm part of the problem here when it comes to hockey and Canada's hopes to bring a Stanley Cup north of the border for the first time since the Montreal Canadiens did it way back in the early 90s. Bike lanes, folks. This is something that garnered a lot of attention during yesterday's show, and I'm sure that some of you will want to continue to comment on it today. Councillors are talking bike lanes, I think, as we speak. I think the meeting is already underway. The mayor's motion on pausing new bike lanes is already stirring up lots of conversation ahead of the meeting. Of course, the motion calls for a pause on bike lanes pending a staff report looking into the impact new lanes would have on traffic congestion. It also points to the ballooning price tag for the AAA bike network from the original estimate of $25 million, now just shy of $100 million. And I think part of the debate is the tendering process and the procurement process in general. I think that contractors, and unfortunately, take advantage of the municipality in this instance, and I just think there's some gouging going on, folks. How could the price escalate that much? We're talking about bike lanes, folks. It shouldn't be rocket science. Why not share the sidewalk? Why not utilize the sidewalk or expand the sidewalks a little bit? And have a shared use or something. I just think that there's a better way to do this than whatever staff has envisioned. And I think that this motion is a good one, and I think it's necessary, because it's obvious that this whole thing is spiral out of control. And that's not suggesting that I don't support biking or bike lanes or active transportation, because I think that is a good initiative. And I think a good modern city would have active transportation, absolutely. But still, I mean, you have to at some point take a second look at what's going on and press pause. And I think that this is necessary. It's not to say that it's the end of bike lanes, or but if we can do it smarter and more cost efficiently and more effectively, then why not? Why rush into this and waste money and design something that is not as effective as it could be? Just my take, as I always say. We'll get your take between 11 and 12 today when we open the phone lines, and hope to hear from any of you. Thanks to Vanessa Vandeness as well on the other side of the glass of the control board, doing a fine job as always. As mentioned, we will hear from you in about an hour's time. Now it's time to chat with Gar Pardy, retired diplomat, author, columnist. Gar, thanks for joining the show as always, my friend.
Good morning, Todd.
All right, so my oh my, what's happening in Gaza and the Middle East and Israel? This is horrific, catastrophic, and intolerable. Words usually used to describe the policies and actions of a state which are close with which are our close relations. This is something that you penned in a recent column, and you really get into the historical nature of what's going on in the Middle East. And I know that it's a lot to contextualize, but I think it's important that we do so. And if you could just give us a little brief history lesson on Israel, the state of Israel, Palestine, and what's happening there. I know that's a lot to ask, but I think it's important to contextualize this, if you could, please.
Yeah, I think the key factor here is the use of the term insurgency, or as we do it today, everything that contains political violence, we usually use the term terrorism. But insurgency is the word we're using. The Jews, in terms of the early part of this century and their increasing numbers moving into the Middle East, they created an insurgency against both the British and the Palestinians, who were the residents of the area that they traditionally call their homeland. And it is that process that in the aftermath of the Second World War, of course, Israel became an independent country, voted into that status by the new United Nations in 1948. And I mean, just to bring it all up to date, all of the wars, and I'm certainly old enough to remember the wars there. We measured those wars involving Israel in the matter of days. And, I mean, we had the Six-Day War in, I guess, it was 67, and even shorter ones since then. But what is remarkable about what the situation that we face today, of course, is that we're into 19 months of war by Israel in an area that is half the size of Ottawa.
Wow.
Which, in my mind, suggests that the military ability of this current Israeli government, which is probably the most extreme government in the history of Israel, does not understand the world in which it is now living. And, of course, the Palestinians have been decimated in that process, and the Israelis are not confident enough about where they are today to suggest that they can walk away from all of this and let the Palestinians live up to the obligation that all sides agreed to for two states in that area. And that is the fundamental issue for the Palestinians. And making it even more tragic, the traditional allies of the Palestinians, of course, the Arab countries of the Middle East, have all basically come to terms with the existence of Israel as it exists today. And so you've got a real mess there. The Israeli political system running away from any international norm that it undertook when it was created back in 1948. And the Arab countries, the surrounding Arab countries, basically just ignoring the process. And so you have this tragedy, a giant tragedy in my view, of what has happened.
Okay, Hamas. Tell me about Hamas and how embedded it is amongst the Palestinians and its leadership and how it functions.
Yeah, well, Hamas was part of the process in which the Palestinian population that in the area that became Israel in 1948, one of the places the Palestinians went to was Gaza, which was then part of Egypt, and settled in there. Hamas grew out of the results from the 67 war, and basically was an attempt by the Palestinians in the Gaza area to establish a political presence in the negotiations that were going on. And ironically, Hamas in its early days was largely supported by the powers in Israel in terms of somebody that it could negotiate with. In that sense, it was slightly different than when the West Bank, or a part of Jordan that was conquered by Israel in 1967. And in that process, a Palestinian authority was, in the subsequent process, a Palestinian authority was established to be the government for the Palestinians, and it largely was confined to the West Bank. And in the meantime, of course, Gaza was run by Hamas, which was a semi-countervailing power to the Palestinian authorities. But as you can see, this is an extremely complex kind of set of arrangements. But the war that sort of started, or this phase of the war, I don't see it as a war unique to itself, on October 7th, the Palestinians, when they realized that the possibility of a political agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia, I think in absolute desperation decided that this was a last gasp on their part, and they marched into southern Israel and killed 1,200 people. And what we have going on 19 months later is retribution by Israel for that invasion of its then sovereign territory. Okay. And unfortunately, there is nobody in the world that is in a position to do something about this war other than Israel right now.
Okay, so to validate their actions, Israel, and correct me if I'm wrong, claims that Hamas is embedded in Palestine, amongst the Palestinians in Gaza, and finding them and rooting them out is their key objective. Is that basically what the justification is for this?
And you have to go back a little bit here in traditional diplomacy, if you like. A political leadership in many countries that we have found over the years have found that survival can be found by picking a fight with somebody else. And the current Israeli government is using this fight with Hamas in the West Bank, or in Gaza, I should say, as support for its continuance in office. Mr. Netanyahu, the prime minister, of course, has been under investigation for various crimes in Israel, and he sees his remaining in office as insurance against being prosecuted for some of the crimes that he's committed in the past. And hence, I think he and the extreme wings of the Israeli political system are willing to support him. And so you get the nasty war that is going on, which shows no sign of ending at this time at all.
Okay, how much resistance is the Israeli military facing in Gaza itself?
You mean they've destroyed the land?
Right.
I mean, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
You look at, and it is a disaster that has been filmed daily. You turn on your television and you see another part. It's a piece of land 27 miles long by somewhere between 5 and 7 miles wide. It's a tiny piece of land with just over 2 million people. It's not a war in any real sense of the word. Where there is a defined opposition to the Israeli forces. The Israeli forces have free reign over every inch of that land, and they used every part of their military authority to try or to see the war continued, I guess is the only way. It's not a question of domination anymore. Israel dominates Gaza in every sense of the word, including its people.
So what is their objective?
Well, you can go narrow here. Its objective is really, in a political sense, is by Netanyahu and his supporters to stay in office by fighting a war, and so you increase your national support in doing so. The other objective here, which has been talked about by any number of observers here, is that the Israelis are going to try to drive the Palestinians out of that piece of land into the rest of the world, or to kill them, as many of them as they can, in Gaza itself, and take over that piece of land and make it part of Israel.
All right.
This gets you into the area of what the world has described as genocide.
Yeah. So, what expectations internationally do you think that we should have?
You mean we've tried a couple of statements, Canada. You mean in cooperation with the Brits and with the French, and even Netanyahu's comments on those statements, which were mild in every sense of that word. You know, I mean, we were just telling the Israelis basically, look, you should be allowing food to go into this land and medical care to continue. That's basically what the statement said. It didn't get into, if you like, the deep political side of it. The rest of the world, you mean, as far as Europe is concerned, which has always had a very large role to play in Middle Eastern affairs, created some of the problems, of course, are totally preoccupied with the war in Ukraine and trying to get their act together with regard to that piece of aggression. The United States, well, you know, we've got a president right now whose mouth is so large that whatever comes out of it makes no sense whatsoever to the rest of us. And so who's left? Russia is preoccupied with its when it caused the war in Ukraine. And the Chinese are sitting back and waiting for the rest of the world to try to sort this one out. And they're taking advantage of that position. So, but who is left to really impose upon the Israelis any sort of force that would cause them to rethink the policy lines or road that they're on right now?
Gar, always great. Appreciate your insight. Thank you so much. It's a tough topic for sure, but we'll be in touch. Thanks, Gar.
Okay. Watch the game on Thursday night, okay?
All right. Take care, pal.
All the best.
All right. Gar Pardy, retired diplomat, author, columnist. Rise in number of great whites in Nova Scotia waters. No cause for fear, according to an expert who will join me when we come back. All right, a marine ecologist in Nova Scotia says great white sharks get a bad rap as more of the animals start making their way into Atlantic Canadian waters. Joining me here in the studio is Dr. Neil Hammerschlag, founder of Atlantic Shark Expeditions. Neil, thanks for joining the show.
Sounds good.
Oh, all right, so a bad rap, eh? Probably we were chatting off air before we went to air, and Jaws probably has been probably the number one issue here, eh? When it comes to misnomers and misinformation about sharks.
Oh, for sure. Jaws came out like in the summer of 1975, 50 years ago, actually, and scared people out of the water then, and it's been scaring them ever since.
Yeah, kind of a cult classic, eh?
Oh, totally.
Yeah. All right, so let's break down some of the misnomers about sharks here, if you will.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that sharks are these mindless killers that are, out there looking to do nothing but, eat and hunt. And I would say that's pretty far from the actual reality. These animals are smart. They're curious, and they're not mindless at all. They're social animals, and they're certainly not like bloodthirsty. They actually don't feed that often, and they generally avoid places where people are.
Yeah, why don't they don't like humans, apparently, from what I've read?
Yeah, I know. I mean, we're not on their menu. It's not their natural prey item. They haven't evolved to feed on humans. So it's just, I don't think we would be that tasty anyway.
Is that right? But a hungry shark, I mean, there are exceptions, right? I'm sure.
Yeah, just like in the human world, there's exceptions, right? Yeah. There's people who aren't good actors and in the shark world. But in general, I mean, the thing is, if sharks wanted to swim around and eat people, none of us could ever go swimming or surfing or kayaking. And the fact that we do that on a regular basis and shark bite is so extremely rare just tells us, just humans aren't on the menu.
Okay, so what about the frequency of sharks? Are there more in the area now?
It seems to be the case. The last, few years, there seems to be sightings are increasing. And it's probably a number of reasons. I mean, we don't really know, but sightings are increasing. And we think that's probably because, waters here are warming from climate change. And, I think for these sharks that are cold-blooded species, they need to keep their bodies warm. And so I think these sharks, great whites, can keep their bodies warmer than their surrounding water temperature, but they still rely on their whole physiology relies on having a suitable water conditions.
Are they in deep water, shallow water, or where are they generally?
I mean, wherever the water's salty, they can be. So that means they can be anywhere. Some parts of their life, they're in deep water, and some parts are in shallow water. I mean, when depends on the species, like blue sharks and mako sharks, they tend to be further offshore. White sharks, they tend to come up along the coastline looking for example, seals on rocks.
Mm-hmm. And the time of day matters, right, when it comes to the potential for a shark attack?
I would only say the time of day matters, not necessarily when the sharks are feeding, I don't think it really has to do with shark behavior as much as human behavior. I think if you're going surfing or swimming at dawn or dusk or night, you're going to have lower water visibility. It's going to be harder for the sharks to discriminate between, for example, a human foot and a natural prey like a fish.
What about fishing and are they do they get entangled in fishing gear and things like that? Does that happen? I'm sure it does.
It sure does. I mean, that is one of the threats. Like, for example, the white shark is protected in Canadian waters, so you can't go out and hunt and harm a great white shark, but they do get caught, for example, entangled in fishing gear.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So what are some tips, I guess, for what if you had to give tips besides don't be afraid, right? That's the first thing.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is to realize that, fortunately, we're not a natural prey item, that these aren't mindless killers, and that we can and should enjoy the water on a daily basis without the worry of shark bite. That being said, I think, we should be aware, and there is some things we can do to even reduce our risk. Even though our risk is extremely small, we can be shark smart about how we use the water.
Okay, and tagging and tracking sharks, I'm sure that this is evolving, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we ourselves are doing some tagging of sharks, and we track them to understand their movements, their behaviors, to better understand and to understand the risks of these animals and just their lives. But it also helps inform, how, for example, humans, how to reduce our own overlap with these animals and coexist.
Okay, in your expeditions, tell us a little bit about that, little promotion for your business.
Thanks. Yeah, I run Atlantic Shark Expeditions. Atlantic Shark Expeditions provides the public, anybody really, anyone ages 10 and up, to come out on the boat with our team and to actually go see sharks, shark viewing, get in the water in the safety of our shark cage, and help explore sharks with us. So we do science on board, and people get to see the science. They get to dive in the water in the cage with the sharks, and they get to be a part of a special adventure, and happening this summer and fall.
How do people find out more about what you do?
They can check out Atlantic Shark Expeditions. The website is atlanticsharkexp.com. Dr.
Hammerschlag, thanks. Informative and always interesting. People love to talk about sharks. That's for sure, right?
Well, I love chat about sharks, so that's for sure.
Okay, all right, take care. That's Dr. Neil Hammerschlag, founder of Atlantic Shark Expeditions. I have a life back. This is in the CBC, how ketamine therapy is helping Nova Scotians find relief from depression. That when we come back. All right, I saw the story on the CBC website. The headline, I have a life back, how ketamine therapy is helping Nova Scotians find relief from depression. Joining me to discuss this is Dr. Abraham Nunes, psychiatrist at QEII's Mood Disorders Clinic, leads the ketamine therapy program. Dr. Nunes, I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining the show.
Good morning.
All right, so tell us, what is ketamine, first off?
Ketamine's a very old drug. It's originally used as an anesthetic. And eventually, some very clever psychiatrists found that if you use it at a very low dose in an IV infusion, that it can produce very rapid and remarkable improvements in depressive symptoms in people who have otherwise not benefited from other antidepressant therapies. And the rapidity is within 40 minutes to 2 hours in some people.
Okay, so what does it have lasting effects? Tell us about the clinical effects of the drug.
Oh, it's very interesting. The literature would have us believe that the rough sort of average benefit that people would get from a single infusion would be about 7 days, although I've seen this last out for several weeks. from a single infusion. Now, for people who are receiving this clinically, it's typically about 6 infusions over 2 to 3 weeks or so. And the literature would suggest that these people would have about a month's worth of benefit from that, although I've had patients who have benefited for more than 7 months. And again, these are people who other treatments haven't worked for.
How do you measure benefits?
So we use rating scales, the same types of things that would be used in clinical trials. So it's an objective assessment of someone's depressive symptoms. We assess it before. I assess it typically before every single infusion to see how things are progressing, and then in follow-up. And so these are validated measures.
Okay, would you describe this drug as somewhat controversial, the use of it, or is that unfair?
No, it is controversial, and it's something you have to be careful with because it's a controlled substance. People can abuse it, and for many years, people have procured ketamine on the streets for recreational purposes. I think that the important thing to recognize is that you have to take cautions when using any medical treatment. It's most appropriate for medically supervised use, rather than taking this yourself unsupervised. And lastly, we have to consider the risk-benefit ratio of not treating people, right? And so if we avoid this treatment because it's controversial, then we're also allowing people to languish and have quite a high suicide risk without treatment. So I think we have to take the risks and benefits for each case and be careful with what we're doing and be just simply reasonable in our medical decision making.
Is there some stigma surrounding ketamine, do you think?
I think the bigger problem right now is perhaps a bit of overzealous use. I think that especially down south, not to denigrate my American colleagues, but I see a lot of use of ketamine sort of very liberally, and to some degree, this is because a lot of people are suffering without good treatments available for many psychiatric illnesses. But I think that it's probably being used a little bit too broadly in many circumstances. Canada, I don't think we're having as much of that problem.
Yeah, my wife watched, and I watched it along with her, a reality TV show in which it's based in Utah, and ketamine is done in it's a clinical setting, but it almost seemed to be a bit laissez-faire, I would say, the approach of the use of it.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, exactly. I think that we need to follow what the literature is suggesting ketamine is beneficial for. And right now, this is treatment-resistant depression. There's emerging evidence as well for PTSD, which is quite remarkable because PTSD is very difficult to treat. But when we're getting into, in individuals who are perhaps not having a clinical level of depression, but are having dissatisfaction with relationships or wanting just a non-specific sort of psychological change because of some dysphoria that they might be having, I think we need to reevaluate whether that's something you need to intervene with a controlled substance for, right? And so I think we need to stick to the indications that we know are safe with appropriate monitoring protocols and following outcomes and learning as we go all the way in order to improve what we're doing.
How does it make its way into the black market or on the street level? I guess. Well, how does a controlled substance like ketamine find its way into illegal hands?
Well, I think you'd have to ask the people who do that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have really much of an idea of that. I could speculate that if ketamine is prescribed, in an uncontrolled fashion for people to just have, large quantities at home, that there would be a diversion risk to that, right? I think that's a very serious thing. I would suspect that perhaps there's also theft of ketamine from suppliers or something like this. Again, I'm speculating because I don't know how criminals do criminal activity, but when it's given in a supervised medical setting, for instance, at the hospital where we deliver it IV, there'd be really no risk of diversion because the entirety of the drug is administered in an observed fashion.
How is it taken? Like, is it a liquid form? Is it a pill? What is it?
Yes. There's different ways to take it. The gold standard is to infuse it through an intravenous. That's the best way because the drug is fully available this way. There's also a nasal spray. This is a little bit less preferable because not all of it gets absorbed. There's an intramuscular injection, also not exactly preferable because there's a very high peak concentration. It's not a very smooth kind of infusion. And then some forms are available orally. Again, that's not fully absorbed into the bloodstream. So the gold standard is really the intravenous infusion.
Okay, so some people, it's just a straight recreational high. Is that safe to say?
I think that there are people who do that, yes.
And what are the dangers of that? I mean, it kind of goes without saying, but tell me, Matthew Perry, of course, everybody knows, and the CBC story references Matthew Perry's usage and his overdose. So what are the damage? What are the dangers of overdosing here?
Oh, there's several. I mean, addiction can destroy your life because your life becomes consumed by using the drug, procuring the drug, and recovering from it. You sacrifice your family, friends, your job, everything. So this is one thing. Ketamine can also cause pretty serious problems with your bladder. It can cause ulceration of the bladder, and this is predominantly in individuals who abuse it. It can cause problems with cognition as well, problems with your liver. Again, these findings have mostly been in people who have abused ketamine.
Okay,
so there are very, very serious health risks if you're taking this again recreationally.
Okay, so the way in which you administer it, and in this setting, is it harm free? Is that safe to say?
There's absolutely no drug in the world that is completely harm free. So there are risks. However, at the doses that we administer, which are far below what someone would be taking recreationally or far below what they would be using for anesthesia for these sort of short periods of time, the risk is minimized. And we also monitor people very closely. And so again, that minimizes the risk further. But in general, for individuals who have a high suicide risk with treatment-resistant depression that hasn't responded to anything, who, they're off of work, they're away from their families, their life is essentially, just tortured from this condition, that the risks of the depression are much greater than the risks of the ketamine. And that's how that type of decision is made.
Do you anticipate that the use of ketamine will expand clinically here in Nova Scotia?
I hope it does in a responsible fashion. I hope that we don't go the way of many sites in the United States which are just sort of taking self-referrals for non-specific diagnoses for the treatment of ketamine. But I do think it will because the results are remarkable. I mean, I've been able to get several people back to work with this treatment, back to caring for their families. And I think that one of the big benefits we're going to see is reduced strain on the health system because people who are admitted to hospital with depression often stay for several weeks to even months before they see a response, whereas ketamine can get someone well within a week or two. And so I think we're going to see people out of hospital faster once we expand this within the hospital system.
Is it covered under the drug plans?
So a drug that's administered in the hospital is going to be covered. Mm-hmm. What we're doing is we're setting up a pilot program essentially to hire nurses that can help to monitor the infusions. Right now, it's myself and a couple of other doctors who are, we're supervising the infusions. Essentially, we're doing this sort of beyond our regular hours here, and so we're looking to expand that to treat more people. And the money that we're looking for is essentially for personnel, but the drug itself is covered in the hospital. And ketamine is a very inexpensive drug itself.
I was going to ask you about that. The cost is because it's been around for so long, right? That's part of it, right?
Yeah, it's very, very cheap as for the medication itself. In the private clinics, if you go pay for a ketamine infusion, you're looking at between $550 and $750. What you're paying for is the staff time for the monitoring, right? That's the expensive part. Yeah.
So people listening, if they're interested in this, or how do people know if they're a potential candidate for ketamine?
Right now, the easiest way to access it is we have a clinical trial going where we provide ketamine to people with treatment-resistant depression. If they go on a website called Nova Studies Connect, and you search ketamine on there, and Todd, if you'd like, I can provide you with a link afterwards.
Sure.
People can look and they can fill out a pre-screener, and we'd reach out to them for the study if they qualify based on the pre-screener. Then individuals with treatment-resistant depression can contact their psychiatrists, or if you have their family doctors, and they can always put in a referral to be considered for the compassion treatment program, although that is much more restricted to individuals who have tried really extraordinary numbers of different treatments.
Dr. Nunes, very interesting. Thanks for your time.
No, thank you.
All right, take care. Dr. Abraham Nunes, psychiatrist at QEII's Mood Disorders Clinic and leads the ketamine therapy program. Nova Scotia's ambitious Wind West offshore energy plan wins some support with conditions. We'll chat with somebody from the Ecology Action Centre about this when we come back. Premier Tim Houston recently announced that the province is planning to license enough offshore wind farms to produce 5 gigawatts of electricity, would increase eightfold to 40 gigawatts, well beyond the 2.4 gigs Nova Scotia needs. He called on Ottawa to help cover the cost of his new Wind West project, saying the excess electricity could be used to supply 27% of Canada's total demand. Joining us to talk about all this is Thomas Arnason McNeil with the Ecology Action Centre. He's a senior energy coordinator. Thomas, thanks for joining the show. As always, we appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Todd. It's great to be back on.
All right, so kind of broad strokes thoughts on this? First off, what are your thoughts on this Wind West plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, frankly, Wind West is a phenomenal idea. And, your listeners will know that I've been on the show a couple of times, really talking about the need for Nova Scotia to get serious when it comes to harnessing just these incredible offshore wind resources that we do have. So I think that the Premier is, absolutely correct in pointing out that Nova Scotia has tremendous wind resources, particularly in offshore wind. These are some of the best wind resources in the world. And ultimately, I think that the issue here is that we can build much more wind energy than we can use. So the Premier pointed out, in his video talking about Wind West, that we have the highest power demand that we ever have in Nova Scotia is 2.4 gigawatts, and we have gigawatts and gigawatts of electricity that we could be harnessing. So, at the end of the day, I think that could mean tens of thousands of jobs. According to researchers at Dalhousie University, it could mean over $1 billion in annual revenue for Nova Scotia. But ultimately, I think that our ability to really harness that energy is going to depend on two things. And, I think it was very well put in the video that the Premier put out. We are going to need to connect our grid to the rest of Canada if we want to really build an offshore wind industry in Nova Scotia. And I think that is, part and parcel of what the government is proposing with Wind West. This idea that we are going to build a very, very large, high-capacity transmission line that's running from Nova Scotia. It's going to New Brunswick. It will connect with QEII, and it will go to Quebec. And ultimately, this would give us the ability to, really transport a lot of this electricity such that, the province could become a clean energy superpower. So I think that it's a very, very compelling idea. It's something that we strongly support. And I think that, ultimately the devil is in the details when we're talking about energy. We are going to need to work closely and collaboratively with coastal communities, with folks in the fishing industry to make sure that we are, doing this right. But if we can do it right, then what an opportunity at the end of the day.
Do you feel as though enough collaboration and consultation is being done, though? Because this government does not have a reputation for consulting when it comes to a lot of these type of projects.
Yeah, I mean, we're early days. I think at the end of the day, there's certainly more that could be done. But I think that if we start now, I think to start kind of talking to folks who work in the fishing industry, who work in coastal communities, if we start at the earliest phases of project development, to not just consult with the Mi'kmaq Nation, but to really kind of bring them in a collaborative way. Then I think that there is, an opportunity to do this correctly. But we have, Nova Scotia is not the first place in the world to try and develop offshore wind energy, right? They've done it in Scotland, they've done it in Norway, they've done it in different countries in South America and in Asia as well. And I think that every single time when you look at those examples, what you find is that the only way for these types of projects to be successful is really, demonstrating to the fishing industry and fishing communities that their livelihoods are going to be preserved, demonstrating that there is going to be benefit in the form of community benefit agreements to local community. And with Indigenous people, I mean, I think really, cutting them in. When it comes to particularly building a transmission line, what we've seen recently with the line that's being built from Nova Scotia to New Brunswick is, the WMA economic partnership between 13 Mi'kmaq communities, having an equity stake in that project, so a partial ownership stake. And I think that is an opportunity that could exist when we're talking about a Wind West project as well. And that would give us an opportunity as well for, economic reconciliation with the Mi'kmaq Nation, which is something that Nova Scotians, overwhelmingly support. So I think, we're early days. We have a really long way to go. And I think that we are kind of walking a tightrope, here. But at the end of the day, I am fundamentally an optimist. And I believe that we can do this right in a way that is collaborative with all of these stakeholders. And if we do pull that off, then the benefits at the end of this road would just be monumental for Nova Scotia's economy.
And in the end, nothing's perfect, right? No system of generation is perfect. You're always going to have risks to the environment, and nothing's perfect, I suppose, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly true. I think that there are certain technologies in which the benefits, can outweigh the costs, and that's certainly true of wind energy. So when you think about the fact that, there have been rules that have been set in place that require a 25 kilometer offset between, where offshore wind projects can be built in relation to the shoreline, then that is something that I think that you can do to kind of mitigate potential harms. No energy system or energy technology is perfect, but wind, if done right, I think the benefits can outweigh the costs. I think that there are other technologies, and this is certainly true when you think about fracking, where, the costs are much too high, and they're certainly, the costs are higher than the benefits. So, at the end of the day, my organization, I think that we call balls and strikes, and there are good ideas and there are bad ideas. And I think in this context, when we're thinking about, fracking or uranium development, we got to kind of call a ball there and say that the costs are much too high when we think about the environmental impact on our communities. But when we're talking about something like Wind West and really, trying to create a situation where Nova Scotia can become a net exporter of electricity, can become a clean energy superpower, then at the end of the day, I think that the benefits there are just incredibly high. And if we do it right and we, are really working in close collaboration with other ocean users, then again, I just think it's a tremendous opportunity.
Thomas, appreciate your time. Thanks so much. We'll talk again. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
All
right, take care. Thomas Arnason McNeil, Ecology Action Centre Senior Energy Coordinator. What is on your mind today? Perhaps you want to talk about that or bike lanes or whatever else you got in your mind. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls. The way to reach us, 902-405-6000. What is on your mind on this Tuesday? Again, 902-405-6000. Counselors, HRM counselors, as we speak, are talking bike lanes and discussing the motion tabled by HRM Mayor Andy Fillmore, who was on the show yesterday, about pressing pause on bike lanes pending a staff report looking into the impact new lanes would have on traffic congestion. Also, looking at addressing the ballooning price tag, which was originally $25 million. It is now around $100 million, and that number is going to do nothing but go up, and you know that for sure. And a lot of frustration over this. Look, folks, bicycles have become very divisive and polarizing in this city, and not only in this city, but in other jurisdictions as well. Because, look, it impacts a lot of aspects of the commuter experience. Bus lanes are already encroaching on traditional vehicles and passenger traffic, and bike lanes, and it impacts businesses. It impacts the width in which vehicles can, the capacity, the size of the streets. And this does create some congestion. And also the cost. Look, folks, I think that it is necessary, and I don't see any harm in pressing pause at this point and perhaps coming up with a plan or tweaking the plan. I don't see why that is it's not an end to the bike lane plan or the long range plan, but I think it makes sense, folks. I really do. I would support this motion if I were voting. Would you? Yes or no? And why or why not? 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. What's your take on this, folks? Give us a call or whatever else you've got in your mind. Again, 902-405-6000. Len, hello. Hi, Len. Hello, Len. Okay, I'll put Len on hold. I'll go to Dave. Hello, Dave.
Yes, good morning, Todd.
Hi there.
Just talking about the Stanley Cup final, I think we may see the cup back in Halifax. Compliments of Brad Marchand.
Yeah, he's on a mission, isn't he?
He really is. And, you know, if you think of it, he left the Bruins, and he'll go down as a Bruin legend. They love him there still. He captained the team, and, you know, the greats in Boston, you know, we can go down the list there. But if he goes into the Hall of Fame there or whatever, and he will, pretty impressive. And he's in Florida now, new bunch of guys, right? And he's really leading that team to a certain degree. He's probably the ingredient that the Panthers needed this year because they weren't as strong, I don't think, as last year. And they've got the best goalie in the league, I think. The premier goalie is Sergei Bobrovsky.
Yeah,
and he'll win a game for you. I thought the goal that Brad scored in double overtime slipped through the pads of Skinner back in Edmonton there last game 2, and must win. And Brad came through. I don't know. I think the next game is going to be huge. If they go up 3-1, it's likely over. If not, then it could go 7, and obviously would probably go 6. But I still think Florida's going to come out of this one. They just seem so well-rounded in so many aspects. And you give that team a lead, look out, right? So, but regardless, we may see the cup here in Halifax, and that's not a bad thing, I suppose. But if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind talking about the increase in defense spending by Carney, which I applaud, by the way. And you know why he's doing that, don't you, Todd?
You tell me why what's your speculation?
Pressure from Trump.
Yeah.
And so are all the other countries. Otherwise, we would be poking along like we have in the past. And Trump has made it very, very clear that he wants NATO to increase their share. And we're just talking the share, right? And I think it's a shot across the bow that we have to maybe start taking care of ourselves in so many different aspects. So I applaud that, but I also wonder where the financing is going to come from. The spending for this. I mean, we're nursing $1 trillion deficit and more at the rate of $1 billion a week in interest, or at least maintaining that deficit. And are the Liberals going to spend? I mean, I like it myself, but perhaps there's some ways of making some gains in that maybe we can make our own product. But you know darn well, some of the big companies down in the States are going to get the contracts for this. Boeing. Just trying to think of a couple other big, Rolls-Royce, I think, is Britain. But there's huge arms companies in the United States and Trump's thinking ahead of the game here, right? When he's telling all the world, you got to increase your spending on military. Well, the biggest military builder of military product is the United States. Mm-hmm. And that's quite substantial. China has its own thing going on, but I think they're failing on a lot of their things. But I've got some names. I'm just trying to think some of the big companies. I actually might have some investments in those companies, sadly. But that's part of part of your portfolio, right? Yeah. And these are like whether electric or they all kinds of parts. But it's a huge business. I mean, the war machine is a massive business. So I hope we can I see our Tim Houston here said we want part of the action, right? Why not? We've got a shipbuilding thing here. And I like the idea of increasing the soldiers, I guess, as well, like increase our military, because it is pretty sad what we have right now. And it's gotten a little bit better, but if we're going to play more of a prominent role, it'd be nice to see some young men and women get into the military. You were there yourself. What do you have to say about the military?
Well, Dave, listen, I think that I have concerns that just increasing spending for the sake of increasing spending, I do have concerns with procurement and cost overruns. And look, you can spend $1 billion in a hurry when you're talking about military kit, military equipment. And I do think that just spending money for the sake of spending money is sometimes it's a bit of a gold rush for Lockheed Martin and Boeing and some of these military complex companies.
Lockheed Martin, there's a big one.
Yep, yeah, that's right. So my concern is that, Dave, are we just spending money to spend money? I mean, you could order 8 subs and get to 2% pretty quickly, right? So I agree that we've been laggards. We absolutely have been, and we should be reaching that 2%. I agree with that wholeheartedly. But I think that we need to be smart about how we spend the money, and I'm just concerned that too much money will be wasted in a haste to get to that 2% and to show the world and Trump that we're doing our part. What are your thoughts?
Well, sadly, that's going to be the case. Government always wastes money, no matter what. Maybe some of it should go into private entities when we're contracting out, where there is a little bit more transparency, perhaps. I mean, we're seeing that down south. Some of the things that are found in government down there, and you can say the same about our government. I bet you if you go through a lot of the stuff, I'm at the point, Todd, where I'm so numb to debt anymore, because it doesn't seem like any government wants to take, because what do you want to do? You can't cut things because you won't get the vote, right? Right. If you start cutting social programs, none of them have the balls to do it. Yeah. And we're just running up deficit. I agree with you 110%. But I can see money spent in a lot worse ways.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
If we can get some contracts here, and I see Tim's on that right away, right? Tim Houston. Yeah. I love that idea. Why not? Generate whatever that we can get on board with that. But I don't know. But that's Trump. I'm telling you right now. That's the only reason Carney is seeing this. Oh no,
there's no doubt. If Donald Trump isn't in the White House, we're not getting to 2% ever. Because we haven't.
Absolutely not.
It's been decades we've been talking about getting to 2%. It's never happened. So why would it, right? So
right. And I think he's tired of flipping the bill for all these nations that aren't taking care of their. And it's sad that we have to be in this situation, but we've seen what's happened in Ukraine and Russia, right? I mean, the world is changing.
Yeah, Dave, there aren't many things that, and everybody knows this who listens to the show. There aren't many things that I agree with Donald Trump about, but this is one of them that I agree that we have been laggards. And if I'm in the United States and I'm footing the bill for too much of the lion's share of NATO spending, I'm on board with this. I agree. I think that he is definitely the sole reason that we're at 2% for sure.
And by the way, he's also the reason Carney's in there. I'll end up with that, Todd.
Okay,
thanks,
Dave. Take care.
Cheers.
All right, 902-405-6000. Let's go back to Len. Let's try Len again. Hello, Len. Len's having a problem with his connection today. We'll let you go, Len. Try calling us back. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Give us a call. What is on your mind on this Tuesday? We'll be back. All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us again, 902-405-6000. Here's an email from Garrett. Garrett says, the same people complaining about bike lanes are the same people complaining about e-scooters and bikes on the sidewalks. Those types of transportation are the future and are a budget-friendly option for people who can't afford a car. If there was a connected network of bike lanes through the city, then more people would use these types of transportation. Comes from Garrett. What are your thoughts on that, folks? 902-405-6000. Look, I think that people have a legitimate concern about e-scooters and how they get used and misused. I really do. Look, you see these things, and they're very quick, very fast. I don't know what the top speed of an e-scooter is, but they truck along pretty quickly, and they do. Look, and I don't mean to impugn everybody and in a broad brush, because that's not fair. I don't know what percent of the people use them correctly, but it's people who don't. That's what the impression is. You could have 50 people using an e-scooter properly, and one person darting in and out of traffic and causing havoc, and that's the impression that people will have. But look, I just think that when it comes to active transportation, we can't just, no matter what, forge ahead and with complete disregard to cost. To me, that is a big issue. And are they causing congestion? The mayor suggests that congestion is being a result of this. If that's the case, then let's find out. Let's figure it out. Why not press pause and figure out and come up with the best plan and the most cost-effective plan? I don't see any issue with that. The mayor is not saying scrap bike lanes altogether. Let's get rid of them. Let's do away with it, with the concept. What he's saying is let's press pause and let's analyze this and let's have a look at this and let's figure it out. And cost just cannot. You can't just say no matter what we're doing this. I mean, this thing could balloon to $200 million. What's next? 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Hello, Rick.
Hey, good morning.
Hi there.
Look, ditto all what you just said. Here's something that occurred to me back in prior to the election. I was listening to Councillors on the Hot Seat, and Councillor Trish Purdy was on. And, of course, her riding out Cole Harbour Way, it's too far for bike lanes, and you can't go up Breakheart Hill, et cetera, et cetera. So at the same time, I was listening to Way Mason talk about thousands of people using bicycles in Halifax, and I just happen to live on the main route from the bridge to Lake Veinotte, the main bike lane that was installed along my street. It cost $25 million, made a path through Sullivan's Pond. So I decided, well, I have the technology to do time-lapse video. So I did something for Trish. I recorded the number of people, which is easy. You can put a video on for 2 hours, and you can watch it in 7 minutes. So it's not even time-consuming. Nobody has to be there. And I did that 3 times. I did it in the fall, the winter, and spring, and I'm going to do one more in the summer. The results were basically about 35 cyclists during the evening rush hour. That's over 2 hours, 35 cyclists. In February, that was in October. In February, it averaged around 10. At some points, if the weather was bad, it was two cyclists over the rush hour. And coming up in the spring, it was about 40, 45 cyclists. So it's very weather season dependent. This is again the main bike route in Dartmouth. It goes through Dartmouth Park, right down through Sullivan's Pond and off. And anyway, I sent those to Trish Purdy, and she asked me to send them to the city clerk, which means that those videos are now on the public record and were since October. And I fully support the mayor's motion today, and his comment yesterday regarding that traffic has been slowed down on purpose as part of the plan to get people to use more bicycles, et cetera, et cetera. I found that a very interesting thing. I'll let you go. Thanks.
Okay, Rick, thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. Mike is the first-time caller. Hello, Mike.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well, you?
Pretty good. My big concern in this bike issue is the overarching issue of fiscal responsibility. I recall last year we were told, I could be wrong or mistaken, that the cost was $25 million, and we'd be getting the money from the federal government. So how could we say no to quote free money?
Yeah, that's right.
And now here we are, $100 million, and the overarching concern is a massive cost overrun and apparent lack of oversight. Is this indicative of the way this city is run in council? I mean, we seem to have massive overruns, and this is a good example.
Yeah, Mike, I think that's a fair comment. I don't think that this is a standalone when it comes to procurement, and I would expand that to provincial governments and the federal governments as well, and procurement. And I get into this earlier about cost overruns and military procurement and getting to 2% GDP. Just spend money for the sake of spending money. That often just results in massive waste.
Yeah, my concern is the councillors have a fiduciary duty with respect to the public purse.
Yeah.
And it's sorely lacking, if this is an example of how things are run down there. So I agree with our mayor. It's a breath of fresh air. Push the pause button and do a review of the whole thing.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the call, Mike. Call again.
Look, thank you. Have a good day.
All right. Take care. 902-405-6000. Len, hello.
Hello, Todd.
Hi there. Got you this time, pal.
Oh, thanks very much. I couldn't understand. I had everything going good before, but I seemed never could get to talk to you. Anyway, I just like to say two things, and I let you go. I believe that we should be having enough money spent to protect our own country. But I don't think we should be spending as much money as they want to spend on destructive merchandise. We have too much other things that are going on right now in our own country as far as the homeless goes, the price of food and everything. We need to really concentrate more on helping our country with the people that are suffering. The other thing on bike lanes, I'm a businessman. Since when does a price go from $25 million to $100 million? As a businessman, to me, this is gouging. The contractors that are out putting a claim in to do this kind of work are just gouging the taxpayers' money. We don't need more bike lanes in Halifax right now. Our streets are the same way as they were in 1749. They're no different. I believe in that man that was talking to you a few days ago that told you about in Europe, where they make the bike lanes now on the side of where the people walk on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
There's plenty of room there for that to be done. And that would not only be safeguard against the accidents for the people that are on bicycles, but it would also stop the congestion of cars being involved in being congested by bike lanes. What a great idea that would be. There's lots of room there on the side of the sidewalks. Make a bike lane there, and let's leave it there at that. And thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. What is on your mind today? What are your thoughts on this, folks? I agree with what Len had to say. And it's not about being anti-bike or anti-active transportation. It's about being, as he said, fiscally smart, and council has a fiduciary responsibility to us, the taxpayers. And it's not just about bending to special interest groups. It's about, as the mayor said yesterday, being the mayor of everybody at large and everybody's interest. You have to factor all this in, and at some point, the cost becomes prohibitive. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Going to read an email from Brian or parts of it and then back to the phones. Brian says this. He says, the only valid reason to make any kind of pause on bike lanes is the massive cost overruns. Absolutely crazy things get so expensive. But anyone pretending the bike lanes are a significant cause of congestion are fooling themselves. Many of your callers point to no turning on red lights as the main culprit in relation to bike lanes. Most of these are in place to protect pedestrians. We've had a higher number of pedestrian fatalities and injuries around the city over the past few years due to distracted driving. No turning right on red signs are a way to safeguard those crossing the street, not to protect cyclists. And let's not forget about the return to office mandates, bringing thousands of people back onto the roads every day when they don't need to be. That causes more congestion than bike lanes ever would, but so many of your callers seem to think that it was a great idea, telling people not to whine about having to go into the office. Now who's whining when traffic is getting worse? Bike lanes are a necessary part of solving the problem, and pausing them will only reduce their overall efficacy and increase their price. Comes from Brian. Thanks for the email, Brian. Look, you kind of got a double message here when you say that cost overruns are a reason to pause, yet let's not pause because they'll get more expensive in the long run. I get your point. Things are going to be more expensive 5-10 years from now, but I do believe that, to your point, that the main issue for me is absolutely 100% the cost. That to me is prohibitive and a reason to press pause. That in and of itself. But I do believe that we can come up with a better plan than we currently have, and utilizing perhaps sidewalks and expanding sidewalks, or thinking in terms of not necessarily using the street, but using more to the right of the street makes sense. 902-405-6000. Sheldon's giving us a call. Hello, Sheldon.
Hi, Todd. I'm an avid cyclist in Halifax. I use the bike lanes, but I do support the mayor's motion right now. And I think the mayor spoke the truth yesterday when he said that the city is intentionally slowing down traffic. All cities in North America are trying to get cars out of their core. This is just a bigger movement. But the competency that the city has shown on the pricing of bike lanes has been a failure. So we need to step back. We need to get people moving on public transit in Halifax. And buses are not the answer. More buses is not the answer either. We have to get people moving in bigger numbers. And I don't know what the solution is, but the city has proven that they don't know the answers either.
Well, Sheldon, if it's not buses, then what is it?
We have to get some sort of train system. I don't know. I don't know the answer. But I do know that we have a problem in Halifax, and we got to do something. We have a tremendous amount of new drivers. We have a tremendous amount of new residents in our city. This is a city that when I came to Halifax in the 80s, there were cabs everywhere. Mm-hmm. They don't exist anymore. They're all Uber drivers. Yeah. They're all new Canadians. A lot of them are, and that's great. It's wonderful. However, when the light turns green, nobody moves. And it's just the gridlock that we have and is silly. I don't understand it, but it's a real problem. So yes, we do need to pause everything. We need to step back. We need to get some people that know what they're doing.
So you, as a cyclist, it's a dangerous environment, is it not, out there?
No, it's not. No, I've been cycling in Halifax since the 80s. It takes some brains, but it's not. I don't think it's a dangerous environment. It's just a little give and take, and it can be easily done.
Okay, Sheldon, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Take care at 902-405-6000. Mark, hello.
Oh, hi, Todd. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I would also like to expand on the bike lane situation. So I think the thing is, we elect councillors to, represent us on a lot of issues. There are certain councillors that are going to have their pet projects, I understand. But, if you look at the history of this bike lane push, it was really three people at the time that were pushing it a lot. Sean Cleary, Way Mason, Sam Austin, right? I call them like the triumvirate of the bike lane, fanatics. And, it's again, we elected them to do more than that. And yes, have your opinions and go for it. But everything that they promised us just hasn't happened. Okay. it's, Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner, right? If you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's fiction.
Yeah.
Now we have data. It didn't happen. I fully support Andy Fillmore on this one, and I disagree with him on a lot of things. But, we have much more priorities, bigger priorities in this city. And I'm not anti-cyclist, and that's, and that, I think you made a good point, and just because you oppose bike lanes doesn't mean somebody's anti-cyclist. I think that's ridiculous that they're using that. It's a classic political ploy, right? You agree with them on something, so then they just resort to these attacks. The only thing I'm concerned about is a lot of times when, let's review this situation. Like, for the love of God, I'm just going to tell City Council, please don't hire a consultant to do this. Do this in-house. But $100 million, it's absolutely obscene. We still have a massive poverty, homeless problem, often fueled by drug addiction. Mm-hmm. We need to do better as a city, and I applaud the mayor for taking this step.
Okay, Mark, thanks for your comments. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Todd.
Take care. All right, 902-405-6000. Ray, hello.
Hi, how you doing today?
I'm well, you?
Good. Just a couple things on the bike lane situation. I think one person said it, that it kind of is the future. I mean, I've been to Europe, I've been to the Netherlands, and I see hundreds and hundreds of people on. I see businessmen with briefcases cycling to work. Mm-hmm. And if you want to get rid of congestion, let's get people out of cars and into something other than cars. If you want less congestion, and the other thing is, I've driven downtown. I live up in Fall River, but I go downtown quite a bit, and you're going to get congestion in the city no matter what. If you want to talk congestion, go to Toronto. You're literally sitting, not moving on a major 6-lane highway. Yeah. Halifax, it's not congestion. Sure, you're moving a little more slowly, but Halifax is not a traffic congested city. And I think, the bike lanes don't really take, what do they take up, 10 feet? 12 feet of the side of the road, if that. Yeah. So you can't fit a car in that lane anyway. And my final point is, and if we pause this and go down the road, you've already said it, if it's $100 million now, it could be it's already halfway done. It's like building a house and saying, oh, we're not going to borrow more money to build it. We're just going to leave it and let it rot. It's already halfway or 3/4 done. Let's just finish the job and get on with it. And I think people are averse to change. A lot of human beings they just don't like change. That's one thing, to stay the way they are. And I think we're looking down the road. We're not looking at right now. We're looking 5-10 years down the road.
Rafe, do you believe that? And I'm not being argumentative. I just wanted some clarity. So you're saying that if you build the bike network out, regardless of the cost, regardless of the price, no matter what, is that what you're saying?
Well, right now, yeah, because if you want to worry about cost, if you build it now, it might be 100. But if you build it 5 years down the road, it could be 3 times that much.
Well, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be a 5-year pause, does it? It could be just a year.
I don't know. A year. It'll probably be longer than a year. But
it shouldn't be a year. Staff should be able to come up with something within 6 months if it's a priority item. Like have a sense of urgency and get a report out, and then let's sharpen our pencils.
And if they're going to complete it, where are they going to put the bike lanes? They're still going to have to pay for it.
Yeah.
No matter what, you're still. If they change and say, okay, we're going to put them on side roads. Yeah. Then you're going to have to pay to put them on. No matter what, you're going to have to pay for it.
No, I understand that, but Rafe, if you can come up with a better plan that makes more sense, that's going to be that's going to add value to the city and not contribute to congestion. If a better plan is out there, then why not explore it?
Okay, that's all fine and good. You do your plan and you figure it all out and you say we're going to put them here. So you just took a year to say we're going to put bike lanes over here. But so in a year you get okay, let's put them on side roads. So now what are you doing? Are you tearing up people's lawns to put them in? Or are you going to put them on the side, and then those little roads are going to get even more congested? I don't know. I just think at this point, let's just get her done. Get on with it.
Okay, Ray. Appreciate the call, pal.
Suck it up and do it. Yeah,
okay, pal. Thank you. There's an opinion, and that's what it's about, folks. It's about people's opinions, and we're all not going to agree, and that's what the show's about. 902-405-6000. Ed, hello.
How you doing today?
I'm well, you?
Not too bad. Todd, I got a little story to tell you. It started 2 Fridays ago on the 26th of May. My wife got brought into emergency at the QEII, diagnosed with a heart attack. The following Thursday, she had open heart surgery. So I'll go back to the day she got in here. When I sat into the emergency department, the staff was great. Do not get me wrong when I'm making the comments here. The staff was great. But we see mice running around the floor. I was pretty put out by that. Then as I got into the system and she got up and she went into OR with the open heart, me and my son wanted to stay that night, and the hospital told us that we were able to. We could. And when we went to stay, they told us they had to lock down the family rooms because the homeless would take the family rooms and we wouldn't be able to stay in them, so they had to lock them. Now, Todd, I do believe that, and I've been here for 2.5 weeks now, and I'm seeing, I've been watching and I've been paying attention. That's a direct result of somebody not doing their job. Now, I've been trying to get to management of this place, and I cannot break down them barriers to get to them. All I get is a customer relations person, and they tell me to call back in 3 days. I've been trying to write letters, no response. I just don't know what to do. Any suggestions? Even the premier, I'm trying to get to him. Geez, you can't even get to that guy either. You can't get to anybody that can look you in the eye and have a conversation with you.
Well, Ed, look, I mean, first off, how's your wife doing? Is she okay, or?
I'm sitting right in the room looking at her now. She's doing very well. She ended up having a double bypass, and everything turned out good there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very happy with the staff, Todd. I can't say enough about the nurses. They're great. Yeah. But the outside infrastructure, there is a big problem, and I don't understand why people, and all due respect to the people about the bike lanes that I've been listening to the last couple of days, I don't understand why the population is not more concerned about this problem versus that problem. That's a fixable problem down the road or someday.
Yeah.
This problem should be fixed immediately.
Wow, yeah. I
could not, Todd, I got to say that again, so I want everybody to hear.
Yeah.
Could not stay in a family room at the hospital while my wife was in ICU because the homeless people take up that space.
That's I've never heard of that, Ed, in my life. That's the first I've ever heard of that, and that is
Todd, I
unbelievable.
am absolutely so frustrated with that, and I just don't know what to do about it, but I'm working on it. But I just want the public to know what kind of needles, too, by the way. Needles in the parking lots of the hospital. Mm-hmm. Syringes everywhere. And Todd, when I say 40s or 50s and more, needles laying around. And again, I'll go back. That's a direct result of somebody not doing their job. I sat here the other day in the lobby because my wife was resting, so I went down there. There's comfortable chairs there. I sat there. Been in the hospital every day a lot, so I needed a comfortable chair. Anyway, watch the homeless walking in and out, and security sitting at the front desk, not even stopping them, not even looking at them.
Yeah.
There's something wrong, Todd.
Yeah, absolutely there is. Have you contacted your MLA, Ed?
That's just another phone call that you make. You get a voicemail,
that's right.
and you never get a phone call back, right? Same with the premiers. Look, I'm a Tim Houston fan, but can't get to him.
Yeah.
Cannot get to that guy.
Yeah.
The hospital CAO, try to get to that person.
Yeah.
You just can't get to them. So I guess why I'm calling is I'm trying to open up the dialogue so people understand what's really going on behind the scenes. Now, I live in the outskirts. I live in Timberley, so I don't come to the city that much anymore. And I used to be in the city on a regular basis, worked in the city for 30 years. Mm-hmm. Never quite saw it as bad as it is now, and it kind of got away on me. I was kind of shocked when I saw, and I'll go back to the homeless people again just for a second. I think there's more of a drug problem than homeless here. People are kind of saying we have a lot of homeless people here. We have a lot of addicts here is what the problem seems to be, Todd. Now, I understand that coincides. I understand that, but I think people should call it for what it is. We have a serious, serious drug problem. When I count 30 needles in a parking lot of a hospital laying on the ground, that's a problem.
Wow. Wow.
One of the Tim Hortons is on the way in. I stop and grab my coffee for my wife every morning on the way in for the last 2 weeks. One of the Tim Hortons. I won't say which one it is, but it's on the way to the hospital. Yeah. You should probably figure that out. The parking lot peppered with needles. Like, I just don't understand why the people that are lobbying about the bike lanes, and I'm just using them as an example because that seems to be the big topic today, why that many people aren't getting together on this subject, which I do believe is way more serious than anything else we're dealing with right now. I really do believe that it's a problem. Like I say, I haven't been in the hospital system for years, but now that I'm in here, and again, the staff is great, but to see what they're dealing with as far as the homeless walking around here, they have to lock the halls down at night outside of the units where my wife is. I'll just use her as an example. And there's other people in here because the homeless walk around the hallways. That's a direct result, again, of somebody not doing their job. It's a very fixable problem.
I don't know that it's fixable because if it were the reason why it's not being addressed is because it's very difficult to address, and I don't know that we talk about who bears responsibility for it. I don't know. Is it police? Is it our politicians? Is it hospital administration? Is it security? And it's probably a combination of all of that, and the heavy lifting doesn't get done when things are very, very difficult to do, and this is what's happening. And Ed, I don't know. I wish I had some answers for you, pal. I can't believe what you're telling me. It's unbelievable.
I tell you no stories. I tell you the truth.
No,
as far as what you said about the administration of the hospital, I do believe that's where it starts because they are the ones that hire. They're the ones that make the rules here. So they're the people that should be saying to, the contracted out security companies, because that's who's in here. You need to stand at the doorways and you need to stop them from coming in
But Ed, you know darn well those people are making minimum wage or barely above minimum wage doing that job, right?
I do, Todd, but I don't know if that's always an excuse.
No, but what I'm saying, but I guess my point, Ed, is that so what do you do next? You have police officers who are getting paid $100,000+ a year standing there. I mean, this is the challenge, right? This is why nothing's getting done, is because it's an extremely complex issue that you're raising, Ed.
It is, and I will say this about what you just said about Todd. I'm 60 years old, so I've been around for a little while, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of excuses that are constantly used for why things are right and why things are wrong. This one here is healthcare. It's the heart of it all, and I do think that there should be, when it comes to cost, there should be no cost.
Wow.
There should be nobody talking about cost. They should be getting the job done.
Well, what's happening is not sustainable. It's out of control. Obviously.
Absolutely, 100%. It's terrible. And again, I cannot emphasize the staff inside the door. Once you get inside the doors of the major stuff, they're great. They're awesome. They're very good people. They're decent. They love their jobs. And I'll tell you, they're not here for the money.
That's
They're here because they love the job. The people on the outside of the big doors, that's a different horse of a different color.
Right.
But anyway, Todd, you got the gist of it. I hope that opens up some dialogue for some people to maybe get together and have a discussion about this because it is so wrong in so many ways.
Okay, Ed, glad your wife's getting the care that she needs. Thanks a lot.
Take care, my friend.
All right, take care. 902-456-6000. We'll be back with your calls. All right, let's get a couple more callers on before we run out of time. Ann, hello.
Yeah, I think it's a shame that they're always wanting bicycle lanes when we have homeless people. We need to take all that money and make homes for people, and also I get jobs for people. They should pay $250 a year for driving the bike, and they should have all the motor vehicles checked and have the Department of Motor Vehicles give them permits to drive bikes and be trained, because some of them don't know how to give a hand signal. They drive in front of you, or they're driving two abreast, like in front of the car, and I don't pass them. I just linger behind because I'm not going to get into a head-on collision because they're deciding that they're going to just drive beside each other and talk, and I'm not going to beep at them either because I don't want them to fall over.
Okay, and I think it's careful that we don't generalize and paint all cyclists with a broad brush. So I think.
I'm not just saying that's just not the two. I've seen this many times. I'm not just talking about two people. I'm talking about this or a family, and it was really scary of a mother and father and two children, and they're all over the street. And they should be, just teaching the children how to drive. But they should have the same thing. You get your, a little book and you study it and get the rules of the road for driving the bike, and get your bike checked out every 2 years to make sure. Well, it should be at least a year. I find the motor vehicle thing should be checked out at least a year, every year anyway, your motor vehicle, because you don't know when you're going to have an accident if you're going, you know what I mean? You have no idea. I'm always getting mine checked out anyway just to make sure that I don't have an accident. But, people have got to be trained to drive a bike. Everybody thinks you just can get on a bike and drive it. Well, yeah, you can, but you got to know the rules of the road too.
Okay, I appreciate the call. Thank you. I don't know that we want to bog it down with a bunch of administration, and that would be prohibitive as well. Brian, hello.
Yeah, hey Todd. Look, I've been listening about the bike lanes, and this is something that I've shook my head at for years. I don't get it. People swimming with the sharks. And listen, Ed, I heard your story. I feel terrible for you. It's unbelievable. This is going on all the way across the country. Every province faces their own healthcare issues. And unfortunately, until you're found in a situation where you need it, you don't realize what's been going on with all the money they've been taking. People are swimming with the sharks with these bike lanes or bikes on the road or whatever. It really doesn't matter who's in the right or who's in the wrong. If you get hit, you're going to die. It's not going to be good. And you read about these folks every day in the paper, But they're entitled to their entitlements, and I'm allowed on the road and this and that. Well, fine. Do what you want, but if some drunk driver hits you, it's terrible. It's not right. It's unsafe. And I'm not teaching my kids to ride on the road. We go on the sidewalk, we cut on the grass when people are coming, just regular, just like it was when I was growing up. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be this complicated. But swimming with the sharks isn't good for nobody's health. So, people need to listen to that.
Okay, Brian, appreciate the call. Take care. Thanks for the calls, everybody. We appreciate it very much. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this vote today. I'm sure that we'll get reaction tomorrow when we open the phone lines again tomorrow. Rob Thacker in the Science Files when we come back. All right, it's the Science Files with Rob Thacker, astrophysicist from St. Mary's University. Joining me here in studio, of course, 902-405-6000. That is the way to chat with Rob Thacker. Again, 902-405-6000. Rob, you had a busy week last week.
Oh, yeah. So we had the National Astronomy Conference, Casca, over 200 astronomers on campus at SMU. That was a really successful event. I got a standing O at the end of it. I was really very touched.
Nice. Yeah. Nice. And so when's the next one?
So the last one we did, so that we hosted at SMU, was 2010. So we typically go around the country and keep rotating it around. So the next one, 2040, coming back like a comet.
And probably you and I won't be sitting here talking about it.
I don't think so. I think I'm going to be retired by then.
All right, fair enough. 902-405-6000. We've got a caller, so let's get right to it. Stephen, hello.
Hello. I'd like to ask him what does the ducks, how do they drink salt water?
Why do ducks like salt water?
Yeah, how can they drink it?
Oh, why can't you drink salt water? Okay, so...
why can't the duck?
I'm not sure what you're getting at, Stephen.
So, I mean, you do get some ducks that will live on salt water, and there's some ducks that live on fresh water. There's different types of ducks.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, pal. All right.
Okay.
Take care. All right. Not sure if we get to the bottom of that.
I thought it was going to be a question about why you can't drink salt water. But okay.
Okay. All right. Let's talk to Sam. Hello, Sam.
Hello.
Hi there. Go ahead.
I was just curious what the doctor, he's an astronomer, right?
That's right.
That's right. So I was just curious. I've got a long commute ahead of me, so I was curious what your thoughts were. I'm sure that you're not opposed to space exploration, obviously, being an astronomer.
Sure.
I'm curious what your thoughts are, kind of, with regards to conservation versus space exploration. Yep. I mean, conservation of our current ecosystems and, taking care of the planet that we have now. You always hear in the news, especially down in Texas, Tesla's rockets exploding and debris landing in, protected habitats. And so I'm just curious how you think we should balance those two issues.
This is a great question, and I don't mind saying that this is a question that is not very well addressed in space exploration right now. There are a couple of fundamentals, though, and the first of those is something called planetary protection. And there is a legal requirement to make efforts not to contaminate other planets with bacteria that we have from the Earth. So that is established. Missions do go to considerable effort to try to make them sterile if they're going to be landing on another planet and not risk any kind of contamination there. So that is something that, at least by NASA, is taken very seriously. Right, and to a large extent, other countries have abided by that as well. So planetary protection is like the baseline. Now you're talking about what about if things really took off, if you'll pardon the pun, and then we had people going to Mars and doing stuff on Mars and so on. And the honest answer is, at the moment, it's not clear to me what kind of in situ resource utilization, how much could we use the stuff that's on Mars without sort of damaging the environment. And so my own personal view is that we need to do this in a sensitive way, in a respectful way for the particular systems that we would be going to. I have no patience at all for people who talk about doing massive blasting and things like that. I don't think that's appropriate. I think we should be careful about the types of environments that we create on other planets and be respectful to that environment as well, because there's stuff that's already there. We don't know what's there, right? And that's one of the key points from my perspective.
Right. And I'm more so trying to focus in on the damage that gets done to this planet.
Okay.
Our planet by space exploration.
Oh, I see. Okay. So you're concerned about launches and things like that?
Launches and, emissions. A lot of times it seems like these launch pads, well, I won't say a lot of times, but I can think of a few instances that I've heard of these sort of launch pads being built in and around, conservation areas, or areas that are supposed to be protected because of, endangered wildlife and that sort of thing. It doesn't seem like, and I'm not attacking anyone or anything, but it doesn't seem, from what I know, which isn't very much, to be fair, that the space exploration industry, I wouldn't say they have the best interests of this planet in mind. It kind of seems like we kind of put the blinders on and get excited about exploring Mars and beyond, but it just seems like a lot of times.
Okay. So
what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I know what you're getting at. So let me sort of like divide this in two. So certainly, if you look at what happened in sort of Soviet era launch places and so on, there were some examples of places really getting blown apart by accidents and things like that. Those kind of things, unfortunately, do happen with space. You have a fuel and an oxidizer, and if that all goes wrong, then things fail spectacularly. So that is understood, and the question then is, if you have a system with risk, the government ends up deciding what levels of risks it's prepared to take, right? And so that is obviously where we see the differences of opinion, right? Like there are some people who, for their own particular viewpoints, wouldn't like to see a situation where birds get killed during launches. Birds get killed during launches all the time, right? And so that is something that's known. That is something that is discussed in all of the launch plans and so on. So there is collateral damage. And that is, again, part of the risk that is interpreted by the government. Now, when things go spectacularly wrong, and so as happened with SpaceX literally evaporating its own launch area after the first Starship launch, they've been, how should I put it? They've been hauled over the coals for that, but are they going to never do that again? I mean, it's possible that their way of cooling their big steel sheet might fail and it might get sort of like charred up again. But again, they'll pay penalties for it. I mean, that's just the way these things are done, right? You pay a penalty if you don't meet the environmental requirements.
Yeah. Interesting. No, I just wanted to come on and maybe give a little bit of a different opinion. I would love to see at least the resources that we put into going to space, at the very least, matched into conserving the planet that we have here. But
well, I wouldn't
anyway,
disagree with any of that. And I think what you have to remember is that there is an awful lot of money going into things like net zero. I mean, literally, if you look at the Inflation Reduction Act in the States that was launched like 2 years ago, that was designed to put $1 trillion of tax breaks into developing ecological solutions, right? So that's a lot more money than is going into the space program, I can tell you right now. Right.
That is fair.
Yeah.
And one last thing I want to add on to that, as per your last point, I think that I have no complaints about reducing carbon emissions. I mean, I'm not going to complain about that. But I think a lot of people, particularly, governing officials, kind of get the blinders on where they think that the only thing that we need to be careful of is carbon emissions. But there are, many other ways that humans can have negative impacts on the planet. But anyway,
that's entirely reasonable. And I think the one thing that we need to always remember here is that CO2 emissions, it's in the daily vernacular, and that's why the press really talks about it a lot. There are plenty of other things where there's a lot of work being done by government agencies and so on that we simply don't hear about.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Ron.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. When it comes to NASA and its heyday during the Apollo missions, that was massive spending, though, right?
Oh, that was huge. I mean, that was about 4% of U.S. tax revenues.
Yeah.
Right? So people sort of think we're still at that. No,
we're
40 times less than that now.
Yeah.
Right? So, no, we're not even close to peak NASA in the 60s.
Do you think we'll ever revisit that type of spending?
We're never, ever going back to that.
And why is that? Just politics, right? The political...
Because that was about the Cold War.
Yeah.
Right? That was literally a situation in which the U.S. was concerned that it was falling behind on a technological basis that was significant. Right? It was really significant. We sometimes forget that there was genuinely concerned that if the USSR got high ground in space, that would leave the US at a significant tactical disadvantage, right?
Wow.
So they put a lot of money into it.
Yeah. 902-405-6000. James, hello.
Hi, thanks. I have two questions, if that's allowed.
Sure.
One, do we all need to learn how to use artificial intelligence, especially perhaps people of a certain age? 25 or 30 years ago, when the internet became a thing, we all had to learn how to use the internet or else crawl into a hole and hide. And some people adapted better than others. So question number one, is AI the same thing? In other words, 5 or 10 years from now, it'll just be everybody's using it and you better learn or crawl in a hole. And second question, what's your opinion, Dr. Rob, of offshore wind farms, both economic viability and environmental appropriateness?
Okay.
Anyway, there you go.
So let's start with the first one. So I think that the difference here between AI versus the internet is when the internet was first sort of like, I don't know, coming on the scene from a social perspective, it really was something that the cool kids did, right? And so literally, if you wanted to be on the internet, you had to learn how to use a bulletin board and things like that. And so that was a pretty steep learning curve. And so over a period of time, accessing the internet has become progressively easier and easier, right? To the point where a lot of the tools, literally, you're online before you know it, right? And so AI is going to be different. AI tools are going to be rolled out in a way where we have ChatGPT right now, but if you look at what's happening with assistants and things like that, those are all things that are designed to interact with you in a social way, right? And so I think that the reality is people will end up using AI even when they don't know they are, right? So there's not going to be this steep learning curve. Now, there will be a learning curve for deploying AI in certain environments, certain types of AI and machine learning as well, for that matter, because I do think machine learning is where we're going to make the big advances But in general, it's not going to be the same. It's going to be tools that are made and customized to humans. That's what AI does. And then offshore wind farms in the environment. So the challenge with offshore wind farms is literally survivability, I think, right? And we have a number of designs that are out there as well, functioning in the North Sea, for example. But the Atlantic is a much harsher environment than the North Sea. And I think that's really going to be the thing that really determines how successful these big, giant in some cases, proposed offshore wind farms are going to be. Laying the cables, all of those things, that's been done. We can do that. It's going to be a question of money. Do I think it's worthwhile? Yes, there's a lot of wind resources. But again, it's a question of whether they're going to be economically viable, because you have to pay big upfront costs to put these things in place, and then you get money down the line when it's all operating.
Okay, the reason I was asking, and then I will let someone else get on the line, the Premier put an open letter in the Chronicle Herald recently, Wind West, quote unquote, Nova Scotia is going to have giant offshore wind farms and onshore, and then send the electricity west. So you're saying let's let the companies determine the economic viability, so to speak?
Well, that's where we are. That's a reality. So in terms of shipping things out west, we have to have an effective cross-Canada grid. We don't have that right now. There's a real lack of east-west connections, right? And so I keep saying, rather than talking about a pipeline energy corridor, we need to talk about a power line energy corridor, right? Because that's going to be what we need to really be able to move all of the energy east to west. And the same thing out west, they'll sometimes probably have a lot of solar that they could move out east.
Okay. Interesting times. Thank you for your
James.
Expert opinion.
Appreciate it. Take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach for the Science Files for Rob Thacker. Again, 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back. All right, the Science File continues with Rob Thacker, astrophysicist from St. Mary's University. Give us a call at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. That's the way to get in on the chat. Mike, hello.
Hello, gentlemen. How are you doing today?
Good, thanks.
We're well.
I called about a year ago, Mr. Thacker. If you remember, I was talking about the moon and how it made when they landed a thing on it and it rang.
Okay, seismic activity on the moon.
Yeah, well, basically, when they hit the moon with one of the modules, it rang for hours. So another question I have dealing with kind of a thing is, if the moon came from the Earth from a collision, is the moon made up of the same material as the Earth?
Effectively, yes. Within reason. It's going to be... So the one thing you have to remember is that the moon, because it's smaller, will undergo what's called a different kind of differentiation compared to the Earth. Right? So what things are in what places will be different on the moon compared to the Earth.
I gotcha. Okay, so the other thing, have you heard about the missing planets in our solar system?
The missing planets. Oh, what are you talking about?
Well, I was watching this program online called the Y-Files. I don't know if you've ever heard of it or seen it. But they were talking about that, where the asteroid belt is?
Yeah.
That used to be a planet that was destroyed.
Maybe, but so the usual feeling there is that there's material there that has not been able to form a planet, right? Because of Jupiter's
but they're saying
position.
that there was only 5% left of what the planet used to be. Like whatever over the millions of years that a lot of the stuff's probably left our solar system, but there's only 5% left of what the actual planet was.
Yeah, but what the point I'm trying to make is Jupiter's pull is really, really strong, and it impacts what can happen within the solar system in its vicinity. Like there's something called the Trojan asteroids, and those are only possible where they are because of Jupiter's gravitational pull.
Okay. Yeah. And what about, there's another thing they were also mentioning, which I kind of found interesting, is how the planets were actually formed. They weren't formed. They're saying that they're not formed the way everybody traditionally think they were. They're basically born out of the sun.
Okay, we've got to be careful here. So, ironically, we had a lot of talks about this at the conference last week. So the material that forms what's called the solar nebula does so in a way where material is in a disk, and right in the middle of that disk is the sun, right? And so the material that's in that nebula is basically spinning up and forming kind of like a pancake type distribution. And so you will have stuff that does funnel into the sun, but you will also have material in the disk which isn't actually ever going to get into the sun, obviously.
Okay. And the last question I have is, so all the planets are on the same plane going around the sun, correct?
Yep.
Why?
That's because of the thing that I just talked about. So when all of the material that forms the solar nebula is initially in its particular distribution, it will have what we call a specific angular momentum vector. And so literally like when a skater is spinning, their angular momentum vector points straight up, right? And that particular distribution will have an angular momentum vector. As it collapses down under gravity, that rotation will get specifically picked out, right? You will literally increase that rotation the same way as a skater pulls their arms in, they spin up. You'll have exactly the same thing happening, and then you will pick out and see that rotation direction really, really obviously. That will form where the disk is oriented, et cetera, et cetera.
And that would be like that in all galaxies?
Absolutely. That is a completely uniform thing that happens in all planetary systems, and it also happens in galaxies as well.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, thanks for the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for the Science Files. If you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker, we got Rob for another half hour. Again, 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back. All right, the Science Files continues with Dr. Rob Thacker from St. Mary's University. Give us a call if you'd like to chat with Rob, 902-405-6000. That is the way to do it. Sam, hello.
Hey, it's Sam again. I'm getting greedy here.
Okay.
Dr. Rob, I have another question.
Sure.
I just want to preface this by saying I'm not religious. I'm not like a fundamentalist or anything like that.
Okay.
But I have always been skeptical of the theory of evolution, right? I've never gotten to talk to a scientist before, so maybe you can convince me. Because I know that like high 90% of scientists, generally accept the theory of evolution. But I just remember, even as a teenager, sitting in biology class, learning about DNA and the coding and the mechanical structures inside of cells, like they're like little factories with gears, and I mean. When I look at it, that just screams design to me. Like, it's bright red letters.
How could that have evolved by chance? Is that your concern?
I just can't believe it. I have yet to be convinced that, like, maybe once you get past, like, the whole abiogenesis thing, maybe I could see that. I don't see life forming without some sort of intelligent force, and even then, like the leaps and bounds that you have to take to go from, say, a bird to a reptile to a mammal. This whole irreducible complexity thing really, that argument really speaks me, and I haven't been convinced yet. So I'm curious if you can convince me.
Okay. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't see the steps from like dinosaurs to birds and so on as being really that significant. Once you have the encoding system in place, which is DNA, then honestly, from my perspective, changes in the DNA producing different expressions of form and things like that, it's not too difficult to see that. In fact, we're reaching the point where we're starting to understand a lot of those connections and how they work within DNA. So honestly, I don't see a particular issue with that. Where I do struggle from a scientific perspective is how we got DNA in the first place and how we got the cell structure that we have in the first place. Those two things are really, really complicated, right? And although we have sort of like a number of what I'll call working models for how things could have arisen, the details are still really important, and we're still working through the details. And so you may have heard there's this concept called the RNA world, that RNA was first, And then over a period of time, we had different polymerization and ended up producing DNA. It sounds great, but there's an awful lot of chemistry that has to be understood to make that possible. And so we're not there yet, but again, there's a general sort of idea. And then how we go from having very simple prokaryote cells into the eukaryote cells, which have their own specific nucleus, that's, again, another big step that while people have some ideas for how it could have happened, it's really not fully understood, right? But I will say one of the things that we do have to stop sort of like talking about is although mutation and things like that do happen in a probabilistic way, the selection effects that end up choosing those mutations, they're not probabilistic. They're responses to a particular environment by a relative reproductive capability of an animal. So there is like natural selection is a sort of reasonable concept to me. It will generally produce and select things by different pressures. And I think that's important. It's not just random. You don't just have something that suddenly takes off. It's not. It's about that particular mutation producing a particular fitness which is adapted to the environment, whether that's because it can eat something or reproduce more effectively, whatever, right? I mean, ultimately, reproduction is the thing that determines this in the end. So I can understand the skepticism that you have. I can appreciate that because there's no question the world around us is very complicated, right? But at the same time, there has been an enormous amount of chemistry that's happened over billions of years, and we just tend to not really appreciate how long that is.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I mean, the change between species is definitely more, but believable. But yeah, I also struggle with the creation of DNA and the creation of the basic cell structure. Yeah. But who knows? Maybe we'll figure it out someday. But for now, I'm skeptical. But thanks for answering my question.
Sam. Thanks for the call.
I mean, there is one thing I could say. There's trillions of galaxies, billions of planets. Mm-hmm. We could just be the most incredibly lucky thing in the universe. Yeah. All right? We literally, and you sort of say, well, then we're really lucky. But if we are that thing, then we don't know any better because we're here.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So that's something we're still trying to work out. So this whole idea of the rare Earth hypothesis, like is what's happened here incredibly rare? That's what we're actively trying to figure out with astronomy over the next 20 or 30 years.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. 902-405-6000. Bob, hello.
Good day, gentlemen. My question is, I heard somewhere that only 1% of all life on Earth has been fossilized, and of that, we have only found 1%. Is that true?
I don't know the exact statistics. I'm not a geologist, but it sounds reasonable just because most soft tissues are not going to be preserved, right?
Okay, so we don't really know what existed before us.
Well, I mean, we have hints. I mean, even if you only preserve 1%, that's a lot. Because there's been a lot of animals on the Earth, right?
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
I got another one real quick. What if you were to launch a Saturn V from the moon? What would happen?
So if you launch a Saturn V from the moon, I mean, it's going to go, but you're putting a lot more energy than you actually need to get off the moon. Or I mean, remember, we got off the moon with the little Apollo return spacecraft, which was only like 2 tons, I think, and just one engine. And that's all you need to get off the moon, right? Whereas if you take a Saturn V, that's got enough energy to get you way, way off the moon very, very quickly.
Interesting, but it would work the same as they would in like an oxygen atmosphere?
Are you talking about? So
sorry, I didn't ask that correctly.
Yeah, so the first stage engines would be designed for burning in the atmosphere. There are subtle differences for engines that burn in the vacuum as opposed to the ones that burn in an atmosphere. That's right.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah. Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, Bob. Thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. Eric, hello.
Good morning, Todd. How are you doing?
Well, you?
Good. Dr. Rob, if you're still breaking 80, I'm jealous. I've never been able to do it.
I haven't been at this year, so, yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, that's different for you. Yeah. Anyways, okay, Dr. Rob, I'd just like to get your take on this. I know I'm not trying to be repetitive, but I've been watching Earthquake Watch, and it seems like the whole Earth is shaking right now. Like, you have Colombia, and then you had Argentina, you had Chile, all over South America there. You have California, the Cascadian faults seem to be acting up. The Madrid fault line there going through the central United States seems to be acting up. Turkey just had a major earthquake, and I guess there's a big fault line there.
Okay.
In your world, and you guys talking, do you have any idea? Is this something that is happening?
Okay, so I've literally been able to call up the number of earthquakes with a magnitude of 5 or higher worldwide from 2000 to 2024. Okay, so
right, yeah,
and that shows the highest activity was 2011 when we had over 2,600 earthquakes, and in 2024 we had 1,400.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So this is something the Earth probably goes through.
There's going to be an element of randomness to it because, when energy gets released through plates is going to be different because we can't predict that kind of stuff. We don't have enough data to be able to do it. So there was a little bit of a ramp up from about 2002 up to 2011. You can see that in the data. But again, if it's a random process, right, you'll just tend to see sort of like larger imprints of, large scale releases of energy, I would guess. But the statistics of it would be interesting to look at over a longer baseline. 20 years isn't enough.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And the other question I had for you, have you watched anything on Voyager 1 that went dead for a long time, then it came back?
Oh.
And the scientists are saying that the way it was reprogrammed, that the machinery couldn't have done it itself. Do you have any insight in that, or have you watched it? Or?
My understanding was they actually did reprogramming of it from the Earth.
Oh,
right?
okay.
So there is if you go and Google Voyager reprogramming, there was some things that they did to actually improve the software on the spacecraft.
Okay.
Right, and so that was they didn't know whether it was going to work, but they did that, and so that, as far as I remember, has worked really well.
Okay. So there was some speculation. And again, that's why I call up and ask you, because you can watch a number of things on YouTube and you don't know.
Yeah,
if
be
it's legitimate or not.
super careful with stuff on YouTube. I'm just going to be honest and say I spend a lot of time on YouTube just because when I work out in the morning, I'm trying to find little things to run on the TV. And there's an awful lot of garbage on YouTube. Sorry, just going to be upfront. There's a lot of garbage there.
Yeah. Well, that's why I call up and ask, because I don't have your training and I don't have your understanding, but it does get you interested with some of these things that are going on. What
bothers me about it is so much of it is driven by clickbait, right? That they'll even have so there'll be these epic fail compilations and so on, but the particular sort of capture they have that advertises it will be like a huge wave that's obviously completely out of proportion and things like that. And people, for whatever reason, click on those things and make them the top. It's crazy. Sorry. It's just crazy.
Yeah. They're just looking to get people to click in onto their system,
exactly.
I guess. Well, anyways, thank you for answering my questions. You have a great day.
Thanks, Eric. Take care. 902-405-6000. Science Files continues when we come back. All right, the Science Files continues with Rob Thacker. Give us a call, 902-405-6000. We got Rob to the top of the hour. Get some room for you as well. Again, 902-405-6000. John's giving us a call. Hello, John.
Hello, Dr. Rob.
Hey.
Thank you for taking my call. Doctor, I want to talk about fusion and fission technology.
Yep, sure.
We know that our premier here is really excited about doing uranium mining and also...
Yep, for fission.
So there's a company in Spain that we're a broker for. They're called Weisslop. And they have found the solution to fusion technology, where I'm a broker, and we're hoping to do our first installation in Mexico probably later on this year. So what they've been able to do is take two elements like boron and hydrogen, put them in a little reactor, and hit it with a laser, which produces plasma. Now, they've been able to contain the plasma in like a tube, and what the plasma does eventually is it makes DC energy, you invert it to AC, and you put it into the grid. Now, the only byproduct with this fusion technology is helium.
Now, I guess my question is, it seems like the governments are always 15, 20 years behind of technology. And in your opinion, do you think fission type of energy is a dying industry with respect to fusion? And I think we both know they've been working on fusion technology for years and years.
Right.
So can I get your opinion on that?
So I'm going to be honest with you, without knowing more details about which particular company you're talking about and the design of the reactor, I've got to be a little bit skeptical. And so my understanding with hydrogen boron fusion is the problem is making a laser that's efficient enough, right?
Yeah. Well, the company in Spain is, sorry to interrupt, is Wieslop, WSSLOT, and their unit, it's 5 megawatt fits into a small container. And, so like I said, we're hoping to do an installation in Mexico later on this year. The problem is a lot of people don't believe it like you have. And I haven't seen it up front because they're not showing it to people, but I've seen video with this plasma stream, and you know as well as I do, that's almost over 1 million degrees, but it's contained. It's contained.
I mean, I have to be skeptical because there's an awful lot of claims, as you're well aware, I'm sure, that are made in the fusion space that turn out not to be true. I mean, cold fusion being the obvious one, but anyway. So I have no choice. I'm a scientist and I have to be skeptical. Now,
of course.
Let me get back to what your concern was about fission, right, and whether that's dying. I think the answer to that is big fission does seem to be dying. Right, because no one's prepared to put the money up front to build really big plants, which is a shame because we actually have one of the best designs in the world in the CANDU reactors, right? What is a little bit weird is that there's probably at least enough deposits for 3,000 years of energy production if you look at uranium deposits. So you got to question, are we going to be able to actually create enough power to actually fill in the hole that we need for baseline power? Now, if fusion does come along, and again, without knowing the details, then sure, that would be probably a better alternative than fission, but it's still not completely and utterly clean, right? There are some radioactive byproducts and so on that you have to be concerned about with fusion systems.
Okay, that's great, Doctor. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks for the call, 902-405-6000. Rolly, hello, Rolly.
Hi, how you doing?
Well, you?
I'm still walking and talking. I guess that's good for an old man.
Well, there you go.
I'd like to ask Dr. Rubb his opinion of delusional Donnie's Golden Dome.
Oh, God.
Is there any chance that we could ever build something to make sure somebody can't get through it?
Okay. So, it's a completely reasonable question, right? So can we build something like Golden Dome? And what people need to remember is there's a heck of a lot of difference between the technology that can stop local missiles and rockets, which is the Iron Dome that they have in Israel, versus a Golden Dome, which is designed to stop nuclear weapons, right? The technologies are completely different. You're coming in at completely different vectors.
Well, you're out in space. You're out in space to start with.
Right, exactly. Moving way faster. And so most of the people I know who have any kind of relationship to this go back to the Reagan-era Star Wars proposal and say, that was completely ridiculous. And as far as I can tell, most people feel the same way about Golden Dome.
Well, thanks for. I thought I was getting old and going crazy, but I'm glad you're still telling me I ain't quite nuts yet.
Part of the problem is when you have rockets that are just being fired from a few tens of kilometers away and coming through, one of those gets through, like maybe 100, 200 people die. But if you have nuclear weapons coming through and one gets through, then we're talking 1 million people dying.
Yeah.
Right? So
no kidding. I ain't, like, I'm 71 years old. I've gone through the Cold War and all that stuff. And then we got Putin and Trump trying to take over the whole world. And thank God I'll be dead before they ever get to do it.
Yep, I can completely understand your view. Yep.
Thanks,
Have a good day, guys.
All right, take care.
Yep.
All right, I would think with the 80s till now, the technology that when you're talking about what.
But it's physics.
The precision that would be required and the obstacles that would need to be overcome. You need more than a couple of decades to make that leap, I would think.
So for example, Reagan-era people were talking about beam weapons and things like that, and that was pretty ridiculous. I mean, ironically, one of those beam weapons used a nuclear weapon to power it.
Yeah.
Right? So this is just, it's insanity, and it creates an arms war in and of itself, because if you have any kind of defense system, then your opponent has to have more warheads.
Yeah.
So literally, Putin will go, okay, great, we're going to manufacture warheads. Let's go off producing lots of plutonium in our reactors, and away we go, right? It's just crazy. It's just escalation.
So the fact that Mark Carney's even entertaining that we be a part of this is politics, I'm assuming?
Yes, it's completely politics. Yeah. Right. I mean, if someone down south says, "Oh, well, we'll put you under the Golden Dome," what a ridiculous name.
Yeah.
All right. It's insanity. Sorry, it's absolute insanity.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Right? Just being honest.
Well, we had a good hour. Lots of calls, Rob.
Yeah. Wow. I've got a whole page of names. Yeah, absolutely. So the most sane thing we talked about was probably the offshore wind farms, which I think is great for Tim Houston to be exploring. I'm just going to say, I think that's good, should be explored, but we need to be able to move the energy.
How about uranium, just quickly on that?
Look, I don't have a real problem with uranium and fission reactors, but honestly, it kind of feels like when we have many other technologies coming along, including better battery storage and so on, I'm not sure that we need it. I'm really not sure that we need it. Maybe the price of uranium goes way, way up, and then we have all of the big deposits in Saskatchewan that Canada can use and so on. But I'm not honestly convinced that we need it because it's so expensive compared to other things.
How about uranium locally here?
It all depends how cheaply it can be extracted.
Yeah, and it depends if it's on your land or not.
Well, that's another thing altogether.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, if it's on your land, you have a different perspective, right?
Yeah, totally get it. Yeah, mining rights is a pretty difficult issue.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Rob, always great. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, everyone, for the great questions.
All right, that's Rob Thacker. That's the Science Files. We do that each and every Tuesday from noon until 1. Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate it very much. Thanks to Vanessa Vandeness, as always, on the other side of the glass, doing a fine job. As always, we're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.